What would you do if the person who vowed to protect you turned out to be the one who destroyed your innocence? Could you ever forgive someone who stole your peace, even if they claim to have changed? And when faith demands forgiveness, but your soul demands justice, which path do you choose? This is the heartbreaking and controversial story of Naomi Clark, a woman whose pursuit of love and healing led her straight into the arms of the man who had once shattered her life. It's a story of betrayal so profound that it will leave you questioning the boundaries of forgiveness, the cost of redemption, and what justice truly looks like when the pain runs deep. Before we dive into this emotional journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community at True Crime Stories. Here we bring you gripping real-life true crime tales that explore the depths of human behavior and the choices that define us. Your subscription allows us to continue sharing these powerful stories, raw, untold, and unforgettable. Now let's get into it. Naomi Clark, a compassionate nurse from Atlanta, carried a haunting secret that shaped the course of her life. As a teenager, she had been assaulted by a masked assailant on her way home from an evening church program. The attack was sudden, brutal, and left her with physical and emotional scars that no amount of time seemed to heal. The once vibrant and optimistic girl, whose laughter could light up a room, was replaced by someone who moved through life in a protective shell. The assault didn't just rob Naomi of her innocence, it stole her sense of safety, trust, and connection. She severed ties with her once beloved church, unable to step into a space that had become a bitter reminder of the night her world crumbled. Sundays, which used to be filled with singing hymns and sharing meals with her church family, turned into solitary afternoons spent avoiding phone calls and invitations from concerned friends. In the wake of the attack, Naomi's relationships with those closest to her deteriorated. She withdrew from her community, isolating herself in a cocoon of silence. Her mother, a devout Christian who believed faith could heal all wounds, didn't understand Naomi's refusal to return to church. The once tight bond between them frayed as Naomi's anger and pain boiled beneath the surface. Her friends tried to reach out, but Naomi's curt responses and avoidance created a growing distance. They stopped asking her to join them for outings, and eventually, she stopped being invited altogether. Her academic life also took a hit. Once a straight-A student with dreams of becoming a doctor, Naomi struggled to focus on her studies. The fear and anxiety that followed her every step left her mentally and emotionally drained. She changed her route to school, avoided social events, and even stopped attending extracurricular activities she once loved. The trauma shaped every decision, every step, and every interaction she had from that day forward. Years later, Naomi found her calling in nursing, pouring her heart into helping others. It became her way of coping, a mission to bring comfort and healing to those who needed it most. She was known for her dedication and gentle touch, earning the admiration of her colleagues and patients alike. But while Naomi was a beacon of hope for others, her own heart remained burdened by the weight of her past. She never talked about it. Sometimes she died too. Despite her professional success, Naomi's personal life remained a barren landscape. She avoided romantic relationships, terrified of vulnerability and the possibility of getting hurt again. The idea of letting someone into her life felt impossible. How could she trust someone when the mere thought of intimacy sent waves of anxiety through her? Friends and co-workers tried to set her up on dates, but she always declined, citing her busy schedule or lack of interest. The truth was, Naomi didn't believe she deserved love. The assault had left her with an insidious voice in her head that whispered lies about her worth. She told herself that she was better off alone, that her work was enough to fill the void. But deep down, there was a small, fragile part of her that yearned for connection, a part she had buried so deep she rarely acknowledged it. Her days were spent caring for others, and her nights were spent in the quiet solitude of her small apartment. The walls of her home became her fortress, protecting her from the outside world, but also keeping her isolated. She filled her free time with hobbies like gardening and reading, anything to distract herself from the emptiness she felt inside. For years, Naomi convinced herself that this was the life she was meant to lead. She told herself that the past didn't define her, even as it shaped every decision she made. She told herself that she was at peace, even as the memories of that night haunted her dreams. And she told herself that she didn't need love, even as her heart ached with loneliness. 1 month before her due time, she visited the school library to send a letter to the principal. But fate, or something darker, had other plans. Naomi's carefully constructed world was about to be upended in a way she could never have anticipated. The past she had tried so hard to escape was about to collide with her present, forcing her to confront the very man who had stolen everything from her. The walls she had built around herself were about to come crashing down, and the secrets she had buried were about to resurface with a vengeance. He placed his hand on her shoulder, his face compressing and his eyes large and dark, forcing her to confront the very man who had stolen everything from her. The walls were wrapped around her at first with a vengeance, and the price became too present. Control started climbing up the walls. She gasped. Would Naomi find the strength to face her darkest fears? Could she ever forgive the man who had destroyed her life? Or would the weight of her pain push her toward a path of justice that could not be undone? As the story of Naomi Clark continues, these questions linger like a storm on the horizon, threatening to change everything. Elijah Hayes, a charismatic preacher with a troubled past, emerged as a symbol of hope in the same Atlanta community Naomi once called home. His story was one of redemption, a transformation so profound that it became a source of inspiration for those around him. But beneath the surface of his polished sermons and heartfelt prayers lay a history far more complicated than anyone could imagine. Elijah Hayes, a leader in Los Angeles, sold AIDS Adderall to the devil and helped get Satan out of his country. Born into a fractured home, Elijah grew up amidst chaos. His father was absent, his mother struggled with addiction, and stability was a luxury he never knew. As a teenager, Elijah sought control in all the wrong places, running with a crowd that lived on the edge of legality. Stealing, fighting, and skipping school became his norms. His teachers called him a lost cause. His peers called him unpredictable. It wasn't until his late teens, after a series of escalating run-ins with the law, that Elijah hit rock bottom. Facing jail time for a violent altercation, he found himself sitting in a courtroom, ashamed and defeated. That day, an unexpected encounter changed the trajectory of his life. A judge, instead of sentencing him to time behind bars, offered him an alternative: attend a rehabilitation program run by a local church. Skeptical, but with no other option, Elijah reluctantly accepted. The program was grueling, both physically and emotionally. Days were spent in manual labor, evenings in Bible study. Initially, Elijah resisted, finding the sermons hollow and the prayers meaningless, but over time, something shifted. One evening, during a heated group discussion about second chances, he broke down, pouring out years of anger and frustration. It was then that he felt for the first time a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe he wasn't beyond saving. This moment marked the beginning of his transformation. Elijah threw himself into Scripture, finding solace in the idea of redemption. Over the next few years, he worked under the mentorship of seasoned pastors, learning the art of connection and the power of faith. Slowly, he began to rebuild his life, replacing his reputation as a troublemaker with that of a reformed man on a mission. By the time he returned to his community, Elijah was no longer the boy people whispered about. He was a man of God, someone who spoke with conviction and humility. His sermons resonated with people from all walks of life. He had a unique ability to connect with those who felt lost, offering them the same hope he had once found. His church quickly grew, becoming a cornerstone of the community. Elijah's message was simple. No one is beyond redemption. His story gave him credibility, his charisma drew people in, and his sincerity made them stay. Congregants shared their struggles with him, trusting him with their deepest fears and regrets. To many, Elijah was a beacon of light in a world that often felt dark and unforgiving. But while the community saw Elijah as a man transformed, he knew that his past wasn't entirely behind him. There were moments, quiet, solitary ones, when guilt would resurface, gnawing at the edges of his conscience. He had worked hard to bury the darker chapters of his life, telling himself that his actions now outweighed his mistakes then. Yet, one memory in particular refused to stay buried, no matter how much he prayed for absolution. As he built his ministry, Elijah began to notice Naomi at the edge of his sermons. At first, she was just another face in the crowd, but soon she became someone he couldn't ignore. Her presence was a constant reminder of the past he desperately wanted to leave behind. Despite this, he couldn't stop himself from seeking her out, weaving his way into her life in what he convinced himself was an act of fate rather than manipulation. Elijah told himself he had changed. He believed that the man who had once hurt Naomi no longer existed, and yet his obsession with her only grew. He rationalized his feelings, convincing himself that he was meant to guide her, to help her heal. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't seeking redemption for her sake. He was trying to erase his own guilt. As Elijah stood at the pulpit each Sunday, delivering sermons on grace and forgiveness, he carried the weight of his secrets. He preached about honesty, but his life was built on a lie. He urged others to seek forgiveness, but he hadn't yet sought it from the one person who mattered most. Elijah's journey toward redemption had brought him far, but the sins of his past were not as distant as he liked to believe. His decision to pursue Naomi would set off a chain of events that would unravel everything he had worked to build, forcing him to confront the darkest parts of himself in a way he never anticipated. Naomi's first visit to Elijah's church was filled with trepidation. She had avoided places of worship for years, the thought of stepping into a sanctuary bringing back painful memories of her past. But her best friend Rachel had been relentless, insisting that Elijah Hayes' sermons were life-changing. "Just give it one chance," Rachel urged. "He has a way of making you feel like you're not alone in your struggles." Naomi finally relented, arriving late and slipping into a pew at the back. The congregation was alive with song, their voices rising in harmony, filling the room with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. When Elijah stepped onto the stage, his presence was magnetic. He spoke with passion and vulnerability, weaving stories of his past struggles with lessons on grace and redemption. His words pierced through Naomi's defenses, reaching a part of her she thought had been sealed off forever. After the service, as the congregation mingled, Elijah made his way directly to her. His approach was casual but intentional. "It's great to see a new face," he said with a warm smile. Naomi, caught off guard, muttered a polite reply, unsure how to respond to the sudden attention. Elijah continued, his tone gentle and inviting. "If you ever want to talk or pray, I'm here." Naomi couldn't explain it, but something about his words disarmed her. He seemed genuine, his presence comforting in a way that felt almost too perfect. What she didn't know was that Elijah had been preparing for this moment for months. He had learned about her through Rachel's conversations, piecing together details about Naomi's life. This meeting was no coincidence. It was the culmination of careful planning. Elijah saw Naomi's pain as an opportunity, a chance to position himself as the person who could help her heal. He believed their connection was destined, convincing himself that his interest in her was rooted in divine purpose rather than selfish desire. Over the following weeks, he made it a point to engage with her whenever she attended church, each interaction designed to build trust and familiarity. Naomi, hesitant at first, began to let her guard down. Elijah's patience and understanding chipped away at her walls, and his sermons continued to resonate deeply with her. He spoke of second chances, of letting go of the past, and of finding peace through faith. For someone who had spent years carrying the weight of her trauma alone, his words felt like a lifeline. Outside of church, Elijah made subtle efforts to integrate himself into Naomi's life. He would coincidentally bump into her at local coffee shops or community events, always with a kind word or a thoughtful gesture. Over time, these encounters began to feel less like chance and more like fate, though Naomi never questioned the pattern. To her, Elijah was a beacon of light, someone who genuinely cared about her well-being.
As their relationship grew, Naomi found herself sharing parts of her story she hadn't told anyone in years. Elijah listened intently, offering comfort and scripture that seemed to address her pain directly. His ability to anticipate her needs and provide reassurance made her feel seen in a way she hadn't since before the assault. But while Naomi saw their connection as a gift, Elijah's intentions were far more complex. Each step he took was calculated, designed to deepen her reliance on him. He told himself he was helping her heal, but the truth was more insidious. Elijah wasn't just seeking Naomi's trust. He was seeking absolution for his own guilt. What Naomi perceived as a serendipitous bond was, in reality, a carefully constructed illusion. And as their lives became increasingly entwined, the foundation of their relationship, a foundation built on lies and manipulation, grew more fragile with each passing day. Elijah's pursuit of Naomi was relentless yet subtle, a masterclass in patience and precision. He positioned himself as her anchor, offering unwavering support during moments of doubt and vulnerability. His warmth seemed genuine, his understanding boundless. Slowly, Naomi began to trust him in ways she never thought she could trust anyone again. Their relationship unfolded like a storybook romance. Elijah's gestures were thoughtful, flowers left on her doorstep, handwritten notes filled with scripture and encouragement, and hours spent listening as she unpacked the burdens she had carried alone for so long. Naomi found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done freely in years. Elijah's presence seemed to lift the weight from her chest, replacing the heaviness with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As the months passed, their bond deepened. Elijah introduced Naomi to his congregation as the woman who had brought light back into his life. His sermons often included subtle nods to her influence, weaving her story into his teachings on redemption and grace. For Naomi, it was overwhelming, yet affirming. After years of feeling invisible, she was now at the center of someone's world. She commanded, glancing around the church and seeing Naomi and the others hanging in the woodwork. The night Elijah proposed was nothing short of magical. He led Naomi to a small, candlelit room in the church where they had first met. A table was set with her favorite meal, soft music playing in the background. As she sat down, Elijah took her hand, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Naomi," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "you've shown me what love, strength, and faith truly look like. You've healed parts of me I didn't even know were broken. I prayed for someone like you, and God answered. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Naomi's face as she whispered, "Yes." For the first time in years, she felt whole. The pain of her past seemed to fade into the background, eclipsed by the promise of a future filled with love and faith. She believed this was her moment of redemption, a divine gift after all the suffering she had endured. The wedding planning was a whirlwind of joy and excitement. Naomi's friends and family rallied around her, thrilled to see her so happy after years of sorrow. Elijah's congregation embraced her with open arms, celebrating the union as a testament to God's grace. Every detail of their wedding day was meticulously planned, from the flowers to the vows, each element symbolizing a fresh start. But beneath Elijah's calm and collected exterior, a storm was brewing. As the wedding day approached, the weight of his secret grew heavier. He had convinced himself that his transformation and their love were enough to bury the past, but the truth gnawed at him. Each time Naomi looked at him with trust and adoration, it was a reminder of the betrayal he was hiding. It was Pishet. The closer they got to their wedding day, the more Elijah prayed for strength. He asked for forgiveness, not just from God, but silently from Naomi, hoping she would never learn the truth. He assured himself that what he had done since their meeting, the love he had shown her, the life they were building, was enough to atone for the sins of his past. But could love truly survive when its foundation was built on a lie? Was redemption enough to erase the deepest betrayals? Or did the truth inevitably rise to the surface, demanding to be reckoned with? Who would come first, the truth or the lie? The truth or detraction? But is there such a thing? Do you believe it's possible for someone to build a genuine connection when their actions are rooted in guilt and manipulation? As the wedding festivities ended, Naomi felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Surrounded by loved ones and united with the man she believed was her blessing, she was ready to begin a new chapter. The evening air was cool as they arrived at their home, newlyweds basking in the glow of what felt like divine favor. Inside, Elijah seemed quiet, almost distant. Naomi attributed it to exhaustion from the long day, brushing off his reserved demeanor. She poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider, offering him one as they sat together on the couch. The room was warm and inviting, filled with the soft glow of candles left burning from their celebration. Elijah reached for her hand, his grip firm but trembling. "Naomi," he said, his voice uneven, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Naomi furrowed her brow, concern creeping into her gaze. "What is it, Elijah?" she asked, her tone steady but laced with apprehension. He hesitated, his eyes fixed on their joined hands. "You've always trusted me," he began. "You've believed in the man I've become. And I need you to hold on to that faith, no matter what I'm about to say." A chill ran down Naomi's spine, her instinct screaming that whatever was coming would change everything. "Elijah, you're scaring me," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. "Naomi, I was the one who hurt you all those years ago. I was the one who assaulted you." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Naomi froze, her breath caught in her chest. "What did you just say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I was young, angry, and lost," Elijah continued, his voice cracking. "I didn't know the damage I was causing, and by the time I realized it, it was too late. I've spent every day since then trying to be a better man, to make up for the pain I caused. I've prayed for forgiveness, Naomi. I believed that our love was God's way of giving me a second chance." Naomi pulled her hand away from his, her body trembling. Her mind raced as memories of that night flooded back with a force she wasn't prepared for. The masked figure, the fear, the pain. It was all him. The man she had trusted, the man she had married, was the one who had shattered her life. A man she had trusted with, likely the one who had shattered her life, the one who had made her love him in the first place. He had warmed her when he sang to her, and now that was taken away. However, she had no intention of taking it with her. How could you? She asked, her voice rising. You knew what you did to me, and you still pursued me. You lied to me, Elijah. You made me believe in you. What are you gonna do? You're just gonna let me walk away? I love you, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. I've loved you for years, Naomi. I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. Please, believe me. Naomi stood, backing away from him as if distance could protect her from the truth. You've loved me? No, Elijah. You've manipulated me. You used my pain, my vulnerability, to ease your guilt. This wasn't love. It was control. I thought that you would share my feelings. I thought you wanted this. I thought you wanted to be... I didn't mean for it to happen this way, he said, desperation lacing his words. I thought we could build something new, something beautiful, out of the brokenness. Naomi's voice was firm, her eyes blazing with anger and heartbreak. You didn't think about me, Elijah. You thought about yourself, about covering your sins with the facade of love and faith. The room fell silent, the weight of his confession settling like a storm cloud over them. Elijah reached for her, but she recoiled, her body stiff with rage and pain. The men approached as if to touch her, but Elijah grabbed his arm. None of the others moved. You don't get to ask for my forgiveness, she said coldly. You took everything from me, my peace, my trust, my faith. And now you've taken my chance at happiness. I don't know what you thought this would be, but it ends here. You were wrong. Chase reached out and took her hands. I was so wrong. Yes, she replied, wrapping her arms around his neck, and she went her face in his neck and giggled. You were wrong. Then you tried to hide it and chased it. Naomi turned and walked out of the room, leaving Elijah alone in the silence of his broken dreams. The truth was out, and the life he had worked so hard to construct was crumbling before his eyes. Undine, said, can forgiveness ever be genuine when it's demanded instead of earned? Or is some betrayal too deep to overcome, no matter how much someone claims to have changed? This is something that people do throughout human history, is take responsibility. Naomi sat alone in the dimly lit room, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Elijah's confession played on a loop in her head, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. She could still hear his trembling voice, see the tears in his eyes, but none of it softened the blow. He had orchestrated her pain, both then and now, and she couldn't reconcile the man she thought she loved with the predator she now knew him to be. Outwardly, Naomi appeared calm. She went about her daily routines, responding to well wishes from family and friends about her recent wedding with polite smiles and brief thanks. To the world, she was a glowing bride, stepping into a new life filled with promise. But inside, she was breaking. Every interaction with Elijah became a performance. At breakfast, she nodded along to his conversation, her mind far away. When he offered to pray together, she let him, her lips moving in silence, while her heart remained closed. At night, she pretended exhaustion to avoid his touch, retreating to the farthest edge of the bed they now shared. Hmm? Hmm? I tell you later. Her eyes focused far away. At night, she pretended exhaustion to avoid his touch. At last, her eyes closing at the top of his head. Elijah, oblivious to the storm raging within her, seemed hopeful. He clung to the idea that his confession, while painful, was a step toward healing. He continued his gestures of love, leaving scripture-filled notes on her dresser, preparing her favorite meals, and preaching sermons laced with messages of forgiveness and redemption. But for Naomi, every word, every action felt like salt in the wound. She replayed every moment of their relationship in her mind, now laced with the bitter knowledge of his deceit. The flowers, the thoughtful notes, the seemingly serendipitous encounters, they were no longer sweet memories, but calculated moves in a game he had been playing all along. Her love for him, once genuine and full, had unraveled into something cold and unrecognizable. At work, Naomi found solace in the structure of her job. Caring for patients provided a distraction, a temporary reprieve from the chaos of her emotions. But even there, the facade was beginning to crack. Colleagues noticed her growing distance, the way her mind seemed elsewhere during conversations. When asked if she was okay, she brushed off their concerns with practiced ease, unwilling to share the truth. The nights were the hardest. In the stillness of their home, the weight of Elijah's betrayal pressed down on her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the images of the past and the overwhelming sense of violation that now permeated her present. She wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. Was she to forgive him as he so desperately wanted? Could she ever find peace in the arms of the man who had caused her the greatest pain of her life? Naomi's composure, however, wasn't just a survival tactic. It was a strategy. While Elijah prayed for their union to heal and grow stronger, Naomi was quietly planning her next steps. She knew she couldn't continue as if nothing had happened, but she also knew that confronting him outright would be a battle she wasn't ready for. Her emotions were raw, but her mind was sharpening with purpose. She began to take note of every interaction, every word he said, and every action he took. Elijah thought her silence was a sign of progress, but Naomi's silence was the calm before a storm. She wasn't healing. She was calculating. And I think, would Elijah realize the depth of the fracture he had caused, or would he remain blinded by his belief that love and faith could repair everything? And for Naomi, the question loomed, was justice worth the risk of further breaking what little of herself she had left? Elijah poured every ounce of himself into trying to repair the damage his confession had caused. He woke up early each morning, preparing breakfast and leaving carefully chosen Bible verses on the table. He recited passages about forgiveness and second chances during their quiet moments, his voice steady but pleading. In his mind, redemption was still within reach, if only Naomi could see how deeply he had changed. He spent hours crafting heartfelt sermons for the congregation, often weaving his personal struggles into the lessons. He spoke about the weight of guilt, the power of grace, and the healing that could come from love. To the church, these sermons were poignant and moving, but to Naomi, they felt like manipulation, a performance designed to absolve him in the eyes of others. So Elijah didn't stop at words. He took on more responsibilities at home, insisting on easing Naomi's burden. He cleaned, cooked, and planned small surprises, hoping to rekindle the bond they once shared. One evening, he brought home her favorite flowers, presenting them with a nervous smile. Naomi accepted them with a polite nod, her eyes revealing nothing of the turmoil inside her. Understandably, My only answer. Determined to remind her of the life they were building, Elijah began planning a weekend retreat for the two of them. He spoke excitedly about the idea, a quiet cabin in the mountains, time to reconnect, away from the distractions of daily life. Just us and God, he said, her tone filled with hope. Naomi agreed, her face calm, but inside, her resolve hardened further. Elijah also doubled down on his faith, praying fervently for strength and guidance. Each night, he knelt beside their bed, clasping Naomi's hands tightly in his as he asked for God to heal their marriage. To him, these prayers were acts of devotion, but to Naomi, they felt like chains. Another layer of control, disguised as piety. Despite his efforts, Elijah remained oblivious to the growing distance between them. Naomi's measured responses, her polite smiles, her silent participation in prayers, all were taken as signs of progress. He failed to notice the way her gaze lingered just a moment too long on certain objects in the house, the way she kept her phone closer than usual, or the subtle changes in her routine. In his desperation, Elijah became more insistent, often reminding Naomi of the work he had done to turn his life around. "I'm not that man anymore," he would say, his voice tinged with desperation. "I've spent years making amends, trying to be better. Can't you see that?" But Elijah's words only deepened the chasm between them. For Naomi, his transformation wasn't proof of change. It was a facade that had allowed him to avoid true accountability. The more he pushed for her forgiveness, the more she recoiled, silently reinforcing the boundaries she was building within herself. Why is it so difficult? While Elijah clung to the hope that love could save them, Naomi saw his actions for what they were: attempts to absolve himself, not to truly address the depth of her pain. His gestures felt hollow, his prayers intrusive, and his persistence suffocating. Could Elijah's relentless pursuit of redemption ever bridge the gap he had created? Or was his belief in love's power to heal merely a delusion? And for Naomi, was there any path forward that didn't demand a sacrifice she was unwilling to make? Naomi's days were carefully choreographed, every action designed to maintain the illusion of normalcy. She greeted Elijah with soft smiles and joined him in public prayers, her demeanor calm and composed. To anyone observing, she appeared as the devoted wife, standing by her husband in their shared journey of faith. But beneath the surface, her mind was a battlefield, her thoughts meticulously focused on what came next. Each step in her routine became part of her plan. She began documenting every interaction with Elijah, every word he said that revealed his guilt or attempts to control the narrative. She created a private folder on her phone, recording voice memos late at night when her thoughts were too loud to silence. Each entry was a snapshot of her growing resolve, a collection of truths she could wield when the time came. Naomi also sought solace in the details Elijah overlooked. She started reconnecting with people she had drifted from: Rachel, her best friend, and even her mother. Without revealing too much, she subtly tested the waters, gauging how much support she might have if she chose to expose the truth. These conversations, cloaked in casual exchanges, were her way of rebuilding the connections she had lost in the wake of her trauma. At work, Naomi's focus shifted. She began researching legal avenues, quietly consulting resources on how to address the past without jeopardizing her present. She spoke with a trusted colleague who had once worked with survivors of abuse, framing her questions as hypothetical. Each answer added another piece to the puzzle she was constructing, giving her the tools she needed to take control of her narrative. "If we didn't work together, she'd be trying to escape the system too," she said. Maybe my beloved idea of a paradise shifted altogether, she said. It was at this point that for the first time, her calm facade extended even to moments of intimacy. When Elijah suggested they revisit the mountainside retreat he had been planning, Naomi agreed, her voice steady, her expression unreadable. She knew she had to maintain the illusion that she was moving toward forgiveness, even as her heart burned with anger and determination. What? What? When Elijah suggested they revisit the mountainside retreat, he had to. Naomi's anger wasn't impulsive. It was measured and deliberate. She knew the risks of acting too soon or without preparation. Every interaction, every conversation became a move in a larger game she was determined to win. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was seeking freedom, a way to reclaim her life without letting Elijah dictate the terms. As days turned into weeks, Naomi's resolve only grew stronger. She began to see Elijah not as the man she had loved, but as the embodiment of the pain and betrayal she had endured for years. Her plan wasn't just about confronting him. It was about reclaiming her power, about ensuring that her future was hers to define. I said to him. Elijah, blissfully unaware of her growing strategy, continued his attempts to bridge the gap between them. He organized community events, invited her to share her testimony during church services, and even suggested they start a ministry for survivors of trauma. Naomi nodded along, offering polite affirmations, all while cataloging every word and action for future use. In the quiet moments of the night, Naomi sat by the window, her phone glowing softly in her hands. Each message she drafted, each contact she made brought her closer to the moment when her calm facade would shatter, and the truth she had so carefully concealed would come to light. The question wasn't if she would act, it was when. And when that moment arrived, Naomi knew it wouldn't just be a confrontation. It would be the beginning of her liberation. A statement that her pain would no longer be silenced, and her future would no longer be dictated by the man who had stolen so much from her. What would you do if the justice you sought wasn't just for the past, but a declaration of your right to define your own future? The room was quiet, save for the faint clinking of cutlery against plates. The scent of rosemary and garlic lingered in the air as Naomi sat across from Elijah at their dining table. The meal she had prepared was meticulous, every detail carefully chosen, a final touch to the controlled narrative she had crafted for weeks. Elijah seemed at ease, his face soft with hope as he spoke about their future, oblivious to the storm building across the table. Naomi's gaze, steady and unreadable, was fixed on him, her mind replaying every moment of betrayal, every calculated move that had led to this night. As Elijah reached for his glass, Naomi broke the silence. "Do you know what this reminds me of?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge that made him pause. He looked at her, a smile forming. "What's that?" he said. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "The last time someone took everything from me and thought they could get away with it." Elijah froze, the glass halting midair. "Naomi," he began, but she cut him off with a sharpness that left no room for interruption. "You've spent months preaching about forgiveness," she said, her tone icy, "but not once did you ask yourself if you deserved it. You thought you could manipulate me into absolving you, into letting your sins disappear under the guise of love and redemption." Elijah's face drained of color as he set the glass down, his hands trembling. "I've changed," he stammered. "I've devoted my life to making amends." "You devoted your life to running," Naomi snapped. running from the truth, from accountability, from the destruction you caused. You thought this marriage would be your sanctuary, but it's just another lie in the story you've built for yourself. Her voice grew steadier as she continued, every word cutting like a blade. You don't get to decide when you're forgiven, Elijah. And you certainly don't get to rewrite my pain to fit your narrative. The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Elijah opened his mouth to respond, but Naomi held up her hand, silencing him. I'm done letting you control this story, she said. You've taken enough from me. Tonight, that ends. Elijah's shoulders slumped, his composure crumbling under the force of her resolve. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Naomi's expression softened, but her eyes remained unyielding. What I should have done years ago. Take back my power, my voice, and my future. The confrontation marked a turning point, a moment where Naomi reclaimed the narrative of her life. What happened next would ripple through their community, forcing everyone who knew them to grapple with the uncomfortable truths buried beneath the surface. For Naomi, it wasn't just about justice. It was about liberation, about finally stepping out of the shadow of her pain and into the light of her own strength.